As you heard there, the CIA director is in Paris today to meet with Israeli, Egyptian and Qatari officials to negotiate a deal for Hamas to release more hostages in exchange, it says, for a 2-month suspension of war. This is happening, as we were talking about there with the ambassador, while families of hostages continue to put pressure on the Israeli government to bring their loved ones home.
My son is held somewhere in Gaza, and I'm here to make noise to say we need to bring these hostages home.
That's Jon Polin. His son, Hersh, was kidnapped by Hamas on October 7th after attending the Nova Music Festival in southern Israel. Jon and his wife, Rachel, have tried everything in their power to secure his release, from meeting with officials abroad to demonstrating in front of Netanyahu's private home. The advocacy group Bring Them Home estimates 136 hostages remain in captivity in Gaza. And Jon Polin joins me now from Israel. Jon, nice to see you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm glad you're here. I did speak to your wife, Rachel, back in November. She's quite a strong woman, and I'm sure you're the same. I guess I'm going to start by asking you whether you've heard anything about how your son is doing, and most importantly, whether any of the medication that got in last week, whether you know any of that got to him.
So first, I'll say true words about my wife, Rachel. Very strong person. Unfortunately, we know nothing about Hersh. We know that he was taken on the 7th of October after being grievously wounded. His left arm was blown off. His dominant arm was blown off. We've seen pictures and video footage of the injury and of him being taken. Since that time, we know nothing. About 55 days ago, when the first batch of hostages were released, while we didn't learn anything specific about Hersh and nobody who was released saw him, what we did learn is that many of the hostages that morning on the 7th who were taken into Gaza, especially those who were taken in early in the morning, went straight to a hospital and were given some variation of medical treatment. We can only hope that that includes Hersh, who, like I said, was grievously wounded. But since that time, we've been running around the world, doing everything possible, turning over every stone to help bring home Hersh and all the other hostages. So far, to no avail. Hopefully, we're getting closer.
Yeah, they are kind of superhuman things that you and your wife and others are doing, that's for sure. These reports this morning, and I know you've heard these kinds of things before, so I can imagine what you will say, but they do seem to be real negotiations happening with the head of the CIA and others that would allow the release of hostages and perhaps a 2-month pause in the conflict. How hopeful are you when you hear that kind of thing?
By nature, even after these 114 days, I'm an optimistic person, and I'm staying optimistic. And so I am hopeful when I hear about the meetings happening today in Paris. That being said, I will also clarify, as you touched on, there have been a lot of rumors and a lot of false starts in the last 114 days. So as we say, we are not going to believe a deal until we have Hersh in our arms and the other hostages walking across the border into the arms of their loved ones.
Jon, where are you right now? Are you outside the Prime Minister's home?
Yeah.
Where are you? Yeah.
Exactly. So I apologize for the noise and the lighting. I am in a tent on a cold, rainy night outside of Prime Minister Netanyahu's home in Jerusalem. This tent camp has been set up now for a week with people living here. I've been coming and going, and it's peaceful. We're not making a lot of noise. We're not causing any distraction. But we're here, and we are being a presence, and we're saying we're not going to stop being a presence until our loved ones come home.
How frustrated are you with the government? I was just speaking there with the ambassador to Canada, who obviously says that the goal is twofold: to destroy Hamas and, yes, to have the release of the hostages. But there has been, honestly, it doesn't seem like very much movement on the last point. So how frustrated are you with the Israeli government at this point?
I'm frustrated. On the Israeli government, I will say that I've heard those same two goals mentioned now for a long time. And I can tell you that for one of those goals, there's been focus 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, nonstop. On the other one of those goals, it feels like it's been stops and starts. We send a delegation to talks. They come back for a couple of weeks. We talk about if we should go back to talks, and then they finally do. So I'm frustrated. But I'll also say it's not just with the Israeli government. I mean, I'm frustrated with the world, if I could say that. The world has stood by and allowed currently 136 hostages to be held in terrible conditions where we know that there's starvation and torture and sexual violence and other terrible things happening to the hostages. And we as a world have allowed this to happen. So I feel like I blame the Israeli government, I blame every other government who's sitting at the table, and I blame all of us for allowing it to go on like this. Hopefully, we can bring it to a successful end, and soon.
How are you, I asked your wife this too, but how are you managing to hold up? I mean, how do you put your whole life on pause for this amount of time? And I imagine there's no other choice, but how are you doing that? And how are you feeling about it emotionally?
So we always say that we're doing what any parents would do for their kid. And there isn't a good side to this, but I will say in terms of thinking about how we do it, we have one goal in mind, and that goal is very clear, and that goal is binary. We either succeed or we don't, and that's how we move forward every day. In a lot of goals, whether you're a company or anything else, you could achieve 50 or 70 or 90% success, and that could be okay. We're dealing with a life or death situation where we either bring the hostages home alive or it's failure. Those are the two options. And when it's that clear, you have no choice but to wake up every morning from a few hours of sleep, pull up your boots, and get back to work towards achieving that goal. And that's what we've done for 114 days.
As well as being a music lover and a fun guy, it sounds like, how do you think Hersh is managing? Do you think that he has the inner fortitude to withstand whatever he's living through right now?
I do think that Hersh has a very strong inner fortitude, to use your words. I've seen many times the video of him being taken after not only himself being physically grievously wounded, losing an arm, but what we now know is he was subjected to horrendous things that nobody should ever have to see. He was in a bomb shelter with what we believe to be 29 people, of whom 18 were killed on the spot that morning, including his close friend, who he was at the festival with. And despite all of that, I took strength from seeing the video of his kidnapping, which is to say, he's on his own 2 feet, he pulls himself onto the back of a pickup truck at gunpoint, and he sits himself down. And I guess I started this by saying I'm an optimistic person. I watched that video, and as terrible as it is for anybody to see about a loved one, I took some strength from that, and I've been finding that strength every day since seeing it, that hopefully he's got the inner fortitude and toughness to persevere. Hopefully he knows that we, his parents, his family, his loved ones, his community, the country, and people around the world are pulling for him and fighting for him. And I hope that he is persevering and won't have to persevere for much longer before we bring him home.
Jon Polin, I hope I get to meet him and talk to him, and I hope you get to see him soon. I appreciate you and your wife, what you're doing, and thank you for making time for us today.
Let's have you meet him as soon as possible. It'd be great.
Thanks, Jon. Take good care of yourself there.